ever feel like you're walking into a minefield
Hmm.
with like words,
Mm-hmm.
relationships, am I right? It's
Yeah.
like 1 minute you're having a totally normal conversation, and the next, bam, you're navigating a full-blown relationship test.
Yeah, those disagreements, they can really sneak up on you.
Exactly. But, instead of dreading those moments, what if we could actually, I don't know, get better at handling them?
Right. Like, what if we could turn those arguments into something positive?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving deep into today. We've got 5 expert-backed tips to help us navigate conflict, not just survive it.
And I think the really cool thing about these tips is that they really encourage you to see conflict differently. Like, not as something to avoid, but as a chance to actually grow
Yeah,
closer.
love that.
Yeah.
So are you ready to jump into tip number 1?
Let's do it.
All right, tip number 1 is stay calm and composed. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm already feeling the pressure with this one.
Right. Easier said than done, for
Yeah,
sure. Especially when those emotions start bubbling up.
totally.
Yeah.
So how do we actually do this? Like, what are some practical things we can do in the heat of the moment?
So it all starts with remembering that you are in control of your reactions. Even though it feels like everything's like exploding, you have the power to choose how you respond.
Right. Easier said than done, I gotta say.
Yeah, totally. But like one thing that really helps is to just pause. Like take a few deep breaths, count to 10 in your head, give yourself a second to kind of process what's happening before you react.
Ooh, I like that. Kind of like hitting the pause button on an argument.
Exactly. And sometimes, you might even need to actually hit the pause button. Like if things are getting really heated, it's totally okay to say, hey, I need a break from this conversation. Let's come back to it when we've both had a chance to cool down.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we're not talking about bottling up our emotions here, but more about like choosing how and when we express them.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're calm, we're collected. What's next? What's tip number 2?
Tip number 2 is focus on the issue, not the person.
Oh, this is a big one.
This is huge because it's so easy to fall into that trap of like, you always do this or you never do that.
Oh, yeah, all the time. The
Yeah.
blame game.
Exactly. But what happens when we do that, we immediately put the other person on the defensive.
Right. Walls go up.
And then it just becomes impossible to actually have a productive conversation. So instead of pointing fingers, try shifting your language. Like instead of saying, you always forget to take out the trash, try something like, I felt really overwhelmed and stressed when I saw the trash hadn't been taken out.
Subtle but powerful.
It's all about shifting from blame to understanding.
I like it. Okay, so we're staying calm. We're focusing on the issue, not the person. What's next on our list of relationship ninja skills?
Okay, so tip number 3 is all about taking ownership of our feelings. It's called use I statements.
So we're not just focusing on the issue, we're also being mindful of how we talk about it.
Exactly. And this goes hand in hand with the previous tip. Instead of saying, you made me feel disrespected, which again puts the blame on the other person,
Right.
try something like, I felt disrespected when, and then fill in the blank. You're owning your experience without pointing fingers.
Okay, so it's like instead of saying, you made me feel unimportant when you didn't ask about my day, I could say, I felt unimportant when I shared about my day and didn't feel heard.
Exactly. You're not saying the other person is wrong for their actions. You're just communicating how those actions made you feel.
It's subtle, but it's powerful.
Right. It really can change the whole tone of the conversation.
Okay, I'm liking this. So what's next?
Okay, this next one can be a little tricky, but it's so important. Tip number 4 is take breaks if necessary.
Ooh, yeah, I can see how this one might be tough. Our instinct is to like power through and resolve things right away, right?
Exactly. But sometimes the most productive thing you can do is actually step away from the conversation for a little bit.
Give yourself some space.
Exactly. When things get heated, it's like our brains go into fight or flight mode. And that's not exactly a recipe for productive problem solving.
Right, right. So taking a break is like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. It gives you both a chance to calm down, process your emotions, and come back to the conversation with a fresh perspective.
Love that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about staying calm, focusing on the issue, using I statements, and taking breaks when needed. What's our final tip?
All right, so tip number 5 is all about shifting our mindset. It's called seek resolution, not victory.
Ooh, I like that. Because ultimately, in a relationship, there are no winners or losers in an argument, right?
Exactly. And when we remember that we're on the same team, it changes everything. It's
Mhm.
not about keeping score or proving who's right and who's wrong. It's about finding a solution that works for both of you.
So it's like instead of seeing it as me versus you, it's more like Us versus the problem. This has
Exactly.
been so insightful.
It's been great talking about this.
I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for dealing with conflict in my relationships.
I hope so. And remember, it's all about finding what works best for you and your partner. Like, these are just starting points. The key is to keep the lines of communication open and be willing to experiment and adjust as needed.